A blade hovered an inch from my throat when my eyes opened. I did not know where I was. I did not know how long I had been out. All I knew was cold metal under my back, straps across my chest, and a creature with silver skin leaning over me, holding something sharp and glowing. I froze. My heart slammed so hard I could feel it in my ears. The creature tilted its head, studying me the way a person studies an insect they have never seen before. Then it lowered the blade, not to cut me, but to slice through the ruined fabric of my flight suit near my shoulder. That was when I remembered the crash. My name is Ryan Hale. I was a cargo pilot on a routine run past the outer trade lanes when something tore through my ship like paper. I remembered fire. I remembered the world spinning. I remembered nothing after that, until now, in this room that smelled like burnt sugar and metal, strapped to a table on a ship that was not mine, surrounded by beings that were not human. The creature working on my shoulder wore a uniform, something close to a nurse's coat, though the fabric shimmered like oil on water. Her skin was smooth and pale gray, her eyes large and black, without pupils. She had 4 fingers on each hand, each one ending in a soft blue claw. When she spoke, the sound came out in clicks and hums, but a small device on my collar translated it into words a heartbeat later. Hold still, human. Your wound is deep. I wanted to ask where I was. I wanted to ask if I was going to die. Instead, all that came out of my mouth was a dry croak. She peeled back a strip of burned fabric from my shoulder, and I felt the sting of open air hitting torn skin. I braced for pain, for panic, for anything. But what I saw when I looked down stopped my breath completely. The wound was already closing. Not healed, not clean, but the edges of torn skin were pulling together on their own, knitting themselves shut in front of both our eyes, faster than anything should ever heal. A wound that deep should have needed stitches and weeks of rest. Instead, it looked like something out of a dream, sealing itself while blood still glistened around it. The nurse went still, every muscle in her thin body locked in place. Her black eyes widened until I could see my own reflection in them, small and scared, lying on that table. She dropped the tool in her hand. It clattered against the floor, and the sound echoed through the quiet room like a gunshot. I tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to say something that would calm her down, but she was already moving, backing away from me so fast she nearly tripped over a stool behind her. Her clawed hand slammed against a panel on the wall, and a shrill alarm cut through the silence, a sound that made my skin crawl even though I did not understand a word of what followed it. Doors on both sides of the room hissed open. 2 more creatures rushed in, taller than the nurse, wearing dark armor plated across their chests. They carried weapons that looked like they could cut through steel. My whole body went rigid against the straps holding me down. The nurse pointed at my shoulder, speaking too fast for the translator to catch every word, but I understood enough. Impossible. Not natural. Bring her. The queen must see this. One of the armored guards stepped closer, weapon raised, aimed directly at my chest. I stared down the barrel of something I did not understand, my pulse hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Do not move, the guard said through the translator, his voice flat and cold. One wrong breath, human, and this ends now. I did not move. I barely breathed. Sweat rolled down the side of my face, while 3 alien beings stood around me, staring at a wound on my shoulder, like it was the most dangerous thing they had ever seen. The nurse turned to the guards, her voice sharper now, more urgent. She kept repeating one word that the translator rendered the same way each time. Queen, queen, queen. The taller guard lowered his weapon slightly, though his eyes never left me. He tapped something on his wrist, and a moment later, the straps across my chest released with a hiss. Rough clawed hands gripped my arms and pulled me upright before I even had time to steady myself. My legs wobbled beneath me, weak from the crash, weak from fear, but the guards did not care. They pulled me forward, marching me out of that room and into a corridor lit with pale blue light. Every few steps, more creatures peered out from doorways, whispering to each other, pointing at my shoulder, at the wound that had already scabbed over in the short time since the nurse first saw it. I had never felt so much attention aimed at one small cut on my body. The corridor stretched on, curving upward like the inside of a shell. My bare feet slid against the smooth floor as the guards pushed me faster, their claws digging into my arms hard enough to leave marks. I wanted to ask questions, wanted to understand what was happening, but every time I opened my mouth, one of the guards growled a warning that needed no translation. We reached a set of towering doors, carved with patterns I did not recognize, symbols that glowed faintly gold against the dark metal. The nurse who had first found my wound hurried ahead of us, speaking rapidly to another guard stationed outside, her hands moving in quick, nervous gestures. The doors opened on their own, sliding apart with a deep, mechanical groan. Inside was a massive chamber, its ceiling stretching so high I could not see where it ended. Rows of tall creatures lined the walls, all silent, all watching, as the guards dragged me forward across a floor polished like glass. At the far end sat a throne made of dark stone, and on it sat a figure unlike any of the others, taller, her skin a deep shade of violet, her eyes glowing faintly like embers. This had to be the queen. She rose slowly from her throne as I was brought closer, her long robes trailing behind her like smoke. Every creature in that chamber bowed their heads, except the guards holding me, and the nurse standing off to the side, still trembling. The queen's eyes moved from my face down to my shoulder, studying the wound that continued to seal itself even now. "Bring him closer," she said, her voice deep and slow, carrying through the chamber without needing to be raised. The guards shoved me forward until I stood only a few steps from her throne. Up close, she was even more imposing, her height nearly twice mine, her presence pressing down on the room like a physical weight. She reached out one long hand and gestured toward my shoulder without touching it. "How long ago was this wound made?" she asked, though I was not sure if she spoke to me or to the nurse standing nearby. The nurse stepped forward quickly, her voice shaking. "Less than a full day cycle, my queen. The wound was open to the bone when I first examined him. Now look at it." The queen leaned closer, her glowing eyes narrowing as she studied the mostly closed gash on my skin. A murmur spread through the crowd of creatures lining the walls, soft at first, then growing louder, filled with words I could not translate fast enough to understand. She turned her head toward me, and for the first time, spoke directly to me. "What are you, human?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my whole body trembling under the weight of every eye in that chamber. "I am just a pilot," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I do not understand what is happening. I do not know why my wound is scaring everyone." The queen studied me for a long moment before turning back to the nurse. "Has this ever been recorded before?" she asked. "Any species capable of this?" The nurse shook her head quickly. "Never, my queen. Not among any race we have encountered. This kind of healing would take our kind many full cycles, even with medical aid. He has done this in less than one day, with nothing." A voice rang out from the crowd, sharp and cutting through the murmurs. It belonged to another figure stepping forward, armor darker than the guards, a long scar running down one side of his face. "Then he is a weapon," the figure said, his tone cold. "We should not be standing here talking. We should be studying him, taking samples, learning how this is possible before another empire does it first." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. I felt my stomach drop at the word samples, understanding exactly what that meant, even without needing a translator to explain it further. The queen raised one hand, silencing the scarred figure before he could say more. "We do not take apart what we do not understand, General Draven," she said firmly. "Not without reason, not without proof of danger." "Danger," Draven repeated, his voice rising. "My queen, if his kind can heal like this from wounds that would kill any of us, imagine what they could survive on a battlefield. Imagine soldiers that cannot be stopped by simple injury. This is not curiosity. This is a threat to every empire in this region of space." My chest tightened with every word he spoke. I understood now why the guards had aimed their weapons at me the moment they saw my shoulder. It was not because I looked strange to them. It was because what my body could do frightened them more than any weapon I could have carried. The queen studied Draven for a long moment, her expression unreadable, before she turned back to me. "Is what he says true, human? Are there more like you? An army capable of this healing?" I shook my head quickly, my hands trembling at my sides. "No," I said. "I am not a soldier. I am not part of any army. I fly cargo ships. That is all I do. I do not even know why my body heals this way. It has always been like this, even when I was young. It is not something my whole species can do the same way. Some of us heal faster than others. It is rare, but it happens." The nurse spoke up before the queen could respond, her voice steadier now than before. "My queen, if I may, I examined records from other patients before. Human physiology varies greatly between individuals. This may simply be one trait among many, not a weapon designed with intent." Draven scoffed loudly, stepping closer to the throne. "Or it is exactly what a clever species would say to protect a secret advantage. We cannot risk our safety on the word of one frightened pilot." The chamber buzzed again with whispers, some creatures nodding in agreement with Draven, others glancing nervously between him and the queen, unsure which side to support. I stood in the middle of it all, feeling smaller with every passing second, the wound on my shoulder, now the center of an argument that could decide whether I lived or became a test subject in some cold laboratory. The queen raised her hand again, and the chamber quieted at once. "Enough," she said. "I did not summon this meeting to argue in circles. Bring me the medical scanners. I want a full record of his condition before any decision is made." Draven's jaw tightened, but he said nothing further, stepping back into the crowd with a look on his face that told me this was far from over. 2 more nurses hurried forward, wheeling a strange device between them that hummed softly as they positioned it near me. Thin beams of light passed over my body from head to toe, and a screen beside the device filled with images and numbers I could not read. The nurse who had first found my wound leaned over the results, her black eyes scanning quickly. "His body is repairing damaged tissue at a rate far beyond anything in our records," she said, blood clotting almost instantly, cellular regeneration occurring without any external stimulation. If this trait were somehow isolated and studied properly, it could save countless lives across many species, not just serve as a weapon. The queen's expression shifted slightly at those words, something thoughtful crossing her violet features. "Or heal soldiers faster than any medicine we currently possess," Draven muttered from the back of the chamber, though quiet enough that only those nearby seemed to hear him. I stood there, exhausted, scared, and completely out of my depth, listening to strangers debate my fate as if I were nothing more than an object to be measured and argued over. My legs ached from standing so long, and the adrenaline that had kept me alert since waking up on that table was starting to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. The queen studied the results on the screen for a long moment before finally speaking again. "I have made my decision," she said, her voice carrying through the silent chamber. "This human will not be dissected. He will not be treated as a weapon or a threat. Whatever ability his body possesses, it was not brought here with intent to harm us. It was an accident of birth, nothing more." Relief flooded through me so suddenly my knees nearly buckled, but I forced myself to stay standing, not wanting to show any more weakness in front of the crowd still watching. Draven stepped forward again, clearly unwilling to accept the decision so easily. "My queen, with respect, we cannot simply release a creature with this ability back into space, unsupervised, unknown to us. What if his own people decide to weaponize this trait once they learn how valuable it could be?" The queen turned toward him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Then we will open communication with his people properly, through diplomacy, not through fear and captivity. If this healing ability truly exists among humans, it is something worth studying together, not something to be stolen through force." The chamber fell silent again, this time with a different kind of tension, one that felt like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if Draven would challenge the queen further. He did not. Instead, he bowed his head stiffly and stepped back into the crowd without another word, though the look in his eyes told me he had not truly given up his suspicion. The queen turned back to me, her expression softening just slightly, enough that I finally allowed myself to breathe normally again. "You will remain under care until your wound is fully healed," she said. "Then arrangements will be made to return you safely to your people, along with a formal request to open talks between our worlds. Your body has shown us something we did not expect to find out here, something that could change how we understand healing itself, For all of us, not just your kind. I nodded slowly, still trying to process everything that had happened in what felt like only a few terrifying minutes, though I suspected far more time had actually passed. "Thank you," I said quietly, unsure what else there was to say to a being who held so much power over my fate only moments earlier. The nurse who had first found my wound stepped closer, her earlier fear replaced now by something closer to curiosity, even warmth. "Come," she said gently. "Let us finish treating you properly this time, without the panic." She led me out of that massive chamber, back through the glowing blue corridors, the guards no longer gripping my arms with the same rough intensity as before. My legs still shook with every step, my mind still spinning from everything I had just witnessed. But for the first time since waking up on that cold table, I felt something close to safety settle over me. As we walked, the nurse glanced at me with her large black eyes, studying my face the way she had studied my wound only hours before. "You gave us quite a scare, human," she said, a strange hint of something like amusement in her translated voice. "I have never seen a chamber fall silent so quickly, nor a general so eager to argue with a queen." I managed a tired, shaky laugh despite everything. I did not mean to cause so much trouble. I just wanted to survive the crash. She nodded slowly as we reached the small medical room again, gesturing for me to sit back down on the table, though this time without any straps waiting to hold me in place. "Sometimes survival causes more trouble than the danger itself," she said, cleaning the last traces of blood from my nearly healed shoulder with gentle, careful movements. I sat quietly, watching her work, thinking about everything that had happened since I first opened my eyes on this ship, about the fear in her expression when she first saw my wound closing on its own, about the Queen's decision that had likely saved my life, and about Draven's warning that still echoed uncomfortably in the back of my mind. Somewhere far above us, an entire empire had just learned something new about humanity, something none of us back home even fully understood about ourselves. I did not know what would come next, whether this would truly lead to peace between our worlds, or simply delay a conflict that Draven seemed so certain was coming. But for now, sitting in that quiet room, my wound finally closed and my breathing finally steady, I allowed myself a small moment of relief, knowing that whatever happened next, I had survived the first, and perhaps most important, encounter of my life.